You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. We've got a special episode for this week, and I'm super excited to get started. Ivan, please go ahead and introduce today's guest.
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach. I'm very excited to introduce Marcie Whichard. Marcie is an Executive Director of Veterinary Innovation Council and the VP of Professional Community Relations at NAVC. She's a business executive with extensive experience in setting strategies and delivering financial and operational results. Broad global experience, including internal and external corporate communications, community outreach, crisis management, message development, brand management, and ally development, specializing in areas of industry and public affairs, branding, and issue management. She serves on a Harvey, Petco Love, Pet Peace of Mind, and Pet Partners Board of Directors. That's a lot of titles. Marcie, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So we want to talk today about Veterinary Innovation Summit. It's really exciting to me to talk about this because that's where I unfortunately met Shawn, and that's where this friendship started. And it kind of resulted in many initiatives and sort of business together and trips to Ukraine together where I had to iron his shirts because he doesn't know how to do that. And as well as in this sort of initiative, the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. So I'm very excited to have you here. I wanted to start off with, so VIS is what, like 5 years old now?
4 years because we had to skip last year. So this will be the 4th Innovation Summit.
Right. But the time still passed, so it's 5 years. So we have to account for that. And so what changed? What changed from that first one? I was so impressed with the first one. It was totally different feel. It was, you go to conferences. I got tired from conferences. I used to go to all the critical care ones as a veterinarian, and then, there's not much new was happening. And then when we went to VIS, what was different is that the audience was usually the vendors and the people that are actually building innovation in the community. And you could sit next to, I don't know, John Ayers, CEO of IDEX, in the same audience, listening to the lecture with you instead of listening to him, although he was also a speaker. But what changed since then? Where did you develop and where the VIS is going?
Well, you're right on point. I mean, Veterinary Innovation Summit is a venue for the thought leaders and the innovators in the veterinary community. So it is I would say, very curated experience, but it allows for like-minded people looking to the future, not just solving the problems of today, but looking 5, 10, 20 years out. Where are we going as a profession, and how do we meet the needs of the veterinary professional, but also the consumer, right, the pet owner? And how does that converge, and where does innovation really need to lead us to be relevant for the pet owner, for the consumer in the future?
That makes a ton of sense. Marcie, I'm super excited about this year's VIS. I'm actually going to be hosting a panel on innovation with an all-star cast, which I'm really looking forward to, as well as kind of showing up there with my Talkatute CEO hat on as well. So super excited. But we've got a worldwide audience. People listen to our podcasts from all around the globe. If people are not able to make it in person because the world still is half together, is there avenues for people to participate virtually? Is there going to be content made available after the event? Can you tell our audience a little bit how they can participate either in person or virtually, if that's an option?
Sure. So it is an in-person event in Kansas City. It starts on August 27th through the 29th. We are going to record all of the content so that it will be made available after the fact. How we will deliver that and, any cost associated with that, we're still working that out. But the whole intent of the program is to be an in-person event because, just like you said, Ivan, being there, sitting next to somebody, that's an innovator and a thought leader is so important. And the networking, especially after this last year, I think people are craving that in-person experience, being able to ideate around, certain topics together. This year we've got grand challenges where people will come together and really work on what are the most compelling challenges in the profession and come together with, potential solutions and it's almost like crowdsourcing brainstorming. And then where do we want to take those ideas and thoughts to move those forward? So the program is geared towards an in-person, but we are going to record all the content so that people who aren't able to travel to Kansas City in August will be able to take advantage of it.
That makes a ton of sense.
So I wanted to kind of pick this sense that I had over the last couple events. So since the first one, I think there was sort of a underlying tone of VIS where there's a couple of innovations that were interesting. There's some, there's a couple of vendors, I remember I met Vet Cove guys when they just started a couple of years ago, and right now they're huge, as well as the VetSpire. So I met Sam's business partner there, who was just recently acquired. So interesting stories develop in a short period of time. But underlying tone for VIS a lot was about telemedicine. And it's a bit of a sort of a pain point for me, because I feel like, through all the conversations, there's so much telemedicine. And then it didn't feel like we were getting somewhere. And then last year, because of pandemic, it seems like, okay, the era of telemedicine arrived. And to my frustration, the veterinary community, I don't think they adopted it well. What happened, I think it's, there's some platforms that are adopted, and I think that we're seeing the development of them, but I think it's fundamental sort of training of veterinarians and how they actually, the workflows that they have in the hospitals. So do you know if there is anything exciting aside from telemedicine that is coming to this one, and then other workflows that we're thinking of improving, in the pandemic times, or in all of this? Like, what are the themes? Do you know any other sort of themes that are going through the summit?
Right. So there will be a couple updates from telehealth and telemedicine, and what's happened in the last 2 years and where that's going and so forth. But really, I would say the theme of this summit is the future of work, right? The future of the profession, and how do we innovate the way we do business today to meet the needs of the future. So whether it's the democratization of data or prescriptions, right? If it's the convergence of human health and veterinary health care, how are those coming together from a translational medicine standpoint? And then I would say the future of the healthcare team. The Veterinary Innovation Council did a lot of work the last 18 months around veterinary technicians, veterinary nurses, looking at how do we utilize the whole healthcare team to meet the needs of our professionals, right? But also the needs of the consumer, because we know that there's a veterinary profession shortage here in the US. We don't have enough veterinarians. We don't have enough technicians. So looking at creating even a mid-level role like you would see in human health, a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner, at a master's level, so that their skills, bridge the gap between the veterinarian and the veterinary nurse today. So there will be a lot of conversation about what's the future of the healthcare team look like. There's also going to be a lot of information on consumer analytics, pet owner analytics. We know that over 90% of pet owners self-identify with their pet, right? So they see their pet as an extension of themselves. We also know that from an access to care standpoint, there's a current void, right? So whether it's financial, economic driven, whether it's geography, we know that a good portion of pets aren't seeing the veterinarian for care because they don't have access. So looking at how do we maybe use telehealth, how do we use the veterinary professional, the technician, the nurse, this master's level, how do we revamp how we practice medicine today to meet the needs of the ever-growing pet population, especially here in the US. I think we're at, 83 million households have a pet, but I believe over 50% of those households have an average household income of $50,000 or less. So when we talk about democratization of care, what is incumbent upon the veterinary professional or community to help meet those needs? So, that's some of the work that we'll be talking about, but it really is all about the future of the profession. So there's a lot of, technical innovation, like you mentioned. There's new platforms for telehealth. There's new curriculum for veterinary technicians, et cetera. But it really is just kind of coalescing around what's the future look like.
It's so interesting, Marcie, because, the last year and a half has almost made us have to burn down everything that we knew in the profession and start anew. So I think it's a perfect time to have this conversation around what does the future of work in veterinary medicine look like. So that's pretty interesting, and it's going to be interesting to kind of be part of those discussions. Can you help tease our audience and maybe give us some of the highlights or the speaker profiles or people that are going to be there talking about these things? I'm sure there's people that are going to listen to this show that might have thought about going. So help push them over the edge, would you?
Sure. So first I would say is go to the Veterinary Innovation Summit website, take a look at the program, because the program is packed with amazing content. And I'm not going to go through it all today, but the keynote is Richard Susskind from the UK, who actually wrote an interesting book called The Future of Professions. And that really talks about how does technology transform the work of human experts in the future. And I think that's going to be probably setting the stage as the keynote for the rest of the summit. But we've got Dr. Katie Nelson from Chewy is going to talk about the virtual care revolution. We've got Heidi Sirota from Nationwide talking about democratizing pet ownership by improving access to prescription meds. We've got, I'm going through the program and just pulling out a few. We have your panel, Shawn, the practical application of innovation. That's going to include folks from Purina, from IDEX, from the Veterinary Entrepreneur Academy. We've got a Future of Work panel discussion, which will be hosted by Mark Cushing at the Animal Policy Group. And that'll include people from Nationwide, IDEX, Wellhaven, Petco, PetIQ, Mars Animal Health. So that's going to be very provocative, I think. And then we've got Stacy Anderson, Dean Anderson from LMU, and Dr. Jim Lloyd talking about the new healthcare team model. And then one of the things that I mentioned earlier was the grand challenges. And this is something really different from any conference I've attended in the veterinary profession. And this is really, it's an organized gamification of ideation. So we have 4 grand challenges, one of them being harnessing the power of big data, one of them being maximizing innovation and remaining evidence-based, and what are the required skills of the veterinary professional for the evolving ecosystem we live in. And the attendees will pick a challenge, and then they'll work together in teams, and it's actually a fun game. And I talk about gamification because it is actually a board game. And so you have your challenge and you ideate around what does utopia look like for that challenge, and leave everything at the door that you know today, constraining that utopia, and then coming up with unique and innovative solutions to meet that challenge. So, I mean, those are just some examples, but we've got, I think, close to 30 speakers in 3 days. So it's going to be pretty impactful.
Ivan, I really hope you can come so you can join a challenge that I'm not part of so I can beat your ass. It'd be great. I hope you make it.
Well, it haven't happened so far in any field, so.
There was that one time that we went to CrossFit and then we went to IKEA afterwards. I don't know if you remember that or not.
It didn't happen yet.
Yeah, Marcie, it sounds like it's going to be an action-packed event. What are you most excited for the event? Is it the grand challenges? Is it the speakers? Is it panels? What's most exciting to you?
I guess what's most exciting to me is seeing a acceptance and a mind shift of the profession that we can't continue doing what we're doing and expect to remain relevant. So what I'm hoping and excited for is to actually hear the conversations about, oh, wow, I really need to rethink how we're going to be in the next, 10, 15, 20 years to me, that's the most exciting. Because I don't want to, it's not doom and gloom. It's not necessarily a burning platform, but I think we are at a critical point where we do need to innovate, not just from a technology standpoint, but really from a mindset standpoint.
Yeah, and veterinarians are laggards in changing. So I think that the Veterinary Innovation Summit is sort of that locus from where the ideas blossom. And I really recommend everybody who never been to the Veterinary Innovation Summit to check it out. And it's whether you're a vet, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, if you want to get connected with the industry, if you're thinking to start a startup and you want to meet people, those are all people that should definitely attend. And I do a lot of work on burnout in the veterinary domain, and that's sort of been my passion in the last couple of years. And one of the key trends that I see across all my colleagues and through this podcast as well is that those people that shifted gears, not necessarily left the profession. We always talk about vets leaving the profession, but I myself shifted gears several times, and it's been exciting, and that was through entrepreneurship. So if you're thinking that you're kind of stuck as a veterinarian, I think checking out something like this and feel the spirit of innovation is definitely the place to go to. Marcie, where would people find you? We already mentioned the website, I think, and to learn more about this, where should they go?
Veterinary Innovation Summit. It's basically just Google it, Veterinary Innovation Summit 2021.
Excellent. So we also always ask two questions at the end of the interview. And one of them, is there a book, a TED Talk, a YouTube video, or something like that that inspired you recently that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, actually, I think I mentioned it because our keynote speaker wrote it, The Future of Professions. So, really talking about how technology is going to transform the work of human experts now that we have accessibility across socioeconomic divides of information, right? So, when I think about my parents, and probably for you guys, because you're a lot younger, your grandparents, they had relationships with individual professionals or practitioners. I'd say maybe like a lawyer or a CPA or a doctor, right? Well, when you think about today in this environment, I don't necessarily need to have a personal CPA to do my taxes. I can use TurboTax. If I have a minor legal issue, I could use LegalZoom, right? So I think when we look at the changing demographic and consumer analytics of pet owners, they really are focused on a trusted solution, maybe more so than a trusted individual. And I think Richard and his son Daniel in this book, The Future of Professions, really kind of outline the changing viewpoints of what we would consider experts, technical experts.
Well, that's super exciting. I can't wait to hear him speak. And then the last question, Marcie, is another guest, another innovator, somebody else that you think we should have on the show?
Yeah, I think Dr. Doug Aspros. He's the current chair of the Veterinary Innovation Council. I believe that having, his insight, his experience working on, state boards and being in the profession for many years and now being the chair of the Innovation Council would be pretty exciting.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinarynnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.